Hey everyone, Troy Hammond here, and that means that you're watching or listening to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. Today's episode is an absolute joy because we're chatting with Claudia Batten. Claudia is a founder, she's a mentor, she's a board member, she's a technology enthusiast, she's a futurist, she's all of these things and an awesome human being. And so we're going to sit and talk today about things that we can do to help everyone in the startup industry by looking at it from a governance level, from looking at it as a founder. And she shares her stories that I think are really going to reach a lot of people because they're just authentic and honest and positive and passionate. And I really enjoyed chatting with her. I think you're going to really enjoy listening to this too. So I'll let you get on and enjoy this podcast.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning into the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
Often I'll be starting a conversation and I have this awareness of like the energy's not right in this conversation and like how can I adjust the energy so that this is going to be a really buoyant conversation where I do just not notice an hour go by. So I'm now realizing that I can contribute to that, which is not a bad.
I've had to work on that a lot as a good recruiter. You know, like I have to figure out how to let people get into that flow state quickly so that they don't give me bullshit answers that they've pre-rehearsed.
Yeah.
You know, like I just want the truth and I want their actual skills and experience. And so, I try. I've really, like, I read a lot about psychology and I read a lot about body language and just trying to understand how I can get people comfortable quicker.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard.
I think it's. I'm going to out myself here, but it's really interesting. I'm a board director, so theoretically a grown up, and totally don't identify as a grown up.
Yeah.
Basically, still think I'm a child, and I'll go in these like super relaxed, very chill vibes to an interview, and just completely relax the other person down because I think that's important. And then it's amazing you find what people will tell you in that instance. Yeah. And somebody actually said to me, I pre-warned that person not to be
stuck up.
Or no, just not to miss the fact that Claudia will be very relaxed, but she's listening to every word. And I was like, are you onto me? That's a bit disappointing.
Yeah, you lost your little superpower there.
Yeah. I've completely outed myself now with it. But I do think there's there are two different, there are certainly two main styles, right? One is to be in relationship with people as I'm more senior than you, I know more than you. And I think the other one that's super interesting to me is like, what can I learn? Yeah. And how can I be as even with this person, be it energetically or intellectually or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's, like, for me, a good conversation is 50-50, right? Like, what can I take from that conversation and what can I give from that conversation? And I think there's a real, like, credibility to not having the power balance off at the start, like going in a bit more humble to a conversation. But it must be harder at a board level.
Well, I think people presume both ways. So people presume if I come into something as a director that I am like grown up who has all the answers, which is incorrect. And then other people who don't know I'm a director like take quite a while to realise, no, I'm actually I hold this role and, like I'm not a complete dum-dum even though I might come across that way. I loved your just the 50-50 piece as well. What can I give? What can I absorb? But also what can we create? Yeah. So I think there's also just this exponential additional piece, right, of like actually how much more can we create on top of this in this conversation.
Yeah,
good challenge for us, right?
It really is. And I think especially in this society, right? Like it's so James from Dawn Aerospace was on the podcast. Cool. And he spoke about how they want everyone to love everything for 5 minutes. And so what he meant by that is if someone brings something to you or challenges your thinking and does something, they want people to love it for 5 minutes first. And there's something about this world and society now, like we're so conflicted and we're so at each other all the time. And so I really try and take the stance that if someone gives me an opinion or a fact that I don't agree with, I listen to it and I just don't talk for a while and I just soak it in and I try to experience it before I go back and give them my thoughts. And most of the times I don't give them my thoughts. I might just take it in and listen and then ask them some more questions on it. But
there is unreal power in that. And in just what can I love here? Like,
Yeah.
so not even like I need to fall in love, but what can I like? Let's just start with what can I like? I mean,
Yeah.
I love the provocation of love. But we're so quick to be right and to have what we perceive as the correct opinion and want to be right. You know, there's a lot of that too. And going in to see what we can absorb and how we can even like let our opinions be changed or altered or enhanced. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
There's a lot of reject first that goes on though.
Yeah.
I find it boring.
I find it really boring, and I find it just people's insecurities. You know, like they are trying to be the smartest person in the room when it is the most joyful experience to be the dumbest person in the room and ask lots of questions and learn. I mean, I love it. I've got a podcast where I just get to ask dumb questions every day now. You know, and
so true.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And for me, like one thing that I really enjoy is. So I interview CEOs and CTOs and people on the podcast and, you know, for their jobs and the likes, or I'll take a brief from a, you know, DepSec in government, and within about 2 minutes I just swear for the point of letting them know. Yeah, like, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to be authentic and you can be authentic. And you just watch their body language straight away. They just go, you know, I can just tell this guy, you know, myself. I can tell him my story and I don't have to worry about what I say so much. And that's when you can get to that real good flow state of conversation and, you know, people feel, you know, supported and engaged. And so
there's heaps of ways you can do that too. I used to use the swear word thing when I was starting out in law. So I started my very early days in corporate law. Russell McVeigh. Learned a lot. It was just a hugely valuable experience. And you'd go into, as a, you know, junior, young female, going into these like big commercial conversations, negotiations, whatever, and there'd be certain audiences, some not, some you just had to be on your game and know everything, and that was how you got your credibility. So that was one way. And then there'd be other people who are just hardcore commercial people. You throw an F-bomb out in the early days of those conversations and they suddenly trust you for some reason. Super interesting. But I think there's heaps of ways you can do that too. So figuring out your own style with that. I do love a good swear word.
I don't actually swear much in my personal life at all, but I swear a lot in business. And it's a lot for that. And I think, you know, I have a brand now of, you know, being the, you know, we fucking love startups guy.
True. Know. So you've kind of
doubled
declared
down on
that. It's on the tin.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm excited about the High Tech Awards though?
Oh, it's just always such a good night. Yeah. I mean, it's I've been going forever now, and it's always just been this wonderful accumulation of all of the tech people in New Zealand. So it's just like a big reunion every year. Yeah.
And how do you feel like how does it feel to sit with you being like a flying Kiwi? Like,
I don't dwell very much on that. I feel very awkward about it, to be honest, because I'm constantly just amazed by everybody else in the industry and just I'm so in it for the purpose rather than any level of acknowledgement. So they often say, oh, and our flying Kiwis here tonight, stand up. And I'm like, oh, please God, no. Can I just stay hiding? That would be really, So this has always been for me about building the industry and building the ecosystem, and just I feel this just tremendous buoyance being in that room and knowing where we've come from and where we're going, and that now there's like a Māori high tech award as well, like a breakout with like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I was just hearing about the number of like participants in that, and I'm like, oh my God, we've got to that point now, like. How epic.
Pacifica technology now is phenomenal.
It's so exciting. And like, it used to just be let's get tech going. Then it used to be let's represent females in tech. And that now it's not even a question of representation. It's just that it's about celebration and support. You know, we want to keep building support, but it just feels epic. So every year it's like a reminder of how far we've come. Yeah.
And it's a really good night. Like, they put on some good performances, and you know, as a recruiter walking around the room in an awards night, you know, it can be a little bit awkward sometimes, but I feel like, you know, they're like, what's he want?
I'll be watching you.
Who's he talking to?
Step away from my team.
But you know, I always walk in and it's like for me it's always just like a high school reunion, you know, like I'm catching up with people that I love, and hugs, and you know, like just drinks with fun people, and everyone's relaxed, and there's quirky elements of how people dress and how dolled up people get, and I just love it.
totally. And I often go in there, and this today is an example where I've just had a huge week of board meetings, completely exhausted. And I always go in, it always is the case that is my energy when I'm going in, because for whatever reason, always at the end of a big week. But I get in that room and I'm like, woohoo, let's do this. The energy is so good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it a lot. It's such a fun night. And we had the Wellington SAS party the other night. And,
fun.
And that alone, it was like a little mini Wellington, high tech awards. Everyone was there. People, it was crowd surfing. It was a crazy, crazy fun night.
Nice. I mean, clearly my invitation was lost in the mail somewhere.
Were you in Wellington?
No, but I do live adjacent to Wellington.
Yeah, Serge. Where were you, Serge?
Yeah.
No, he put on a good night. He does good things for the industry. And
Serge and I knew each other like back in the day. We went through school together. So yeah.
Yeah, he was episode number 1.
Good people, was he? He loves being number 1, so that's really nice of you to do that for him.
Yeah. Well, you gotta look after
you
people.
You do. Yeah.
So, what's your background then? Like, if people are listening to this and go, oh, I've heard the name Claudia Batten, but why did she win a Flying Kiwi award? Like, what's been her background?
Who knows? So I studied law and commerce, and went on to Russell McVeigh to do law for 4 years, because that just seemed like the thing you did, right? You got the grades and...
Yeah, and it feels like the law degree now is almost like an entry into the startup ecosystem these days.
Oh, really?
So many lawyers are going into tech. It's not funny.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's a great grounding in thinking. So that's... and I did commercial contracting, so that was a really nice, to be able to negotiate and and have learned from the best at contracting was a pretty powerful weapon. But just the thinking that you learn to think basically in law, and structured thinking. So did that for 4 years, and it did just seem like the thing to do. I was highly argumentative and like to win. What career options do I have? Law seems obvious. Loved it, loved the collegiality, loved the academic challenge. Really actually liked contracting, which I know sounds really weird. But then got to a point where I was so enamored of what was going on in the tech world, particularly in the US, particularly in the e-commerce realm.
What was your exposure to it? Was it through
just reading
contracts or reading?
Yeah. I'm an avid reader, and so I was like obsessed. I would pore over any US magazine I could get, and right then you didn't have the blogs, and you didn't have TechCrunch, and you didn't have that gateway. It was literally reporting through Fortune. There were the odd blogs back then, and Fast Company. I think Fast Company was there. Economist. Just whatever I could read. And obviously there was a big tech boom. So there was, you could absorb it as a international consumer. You could see what was going on. And it just was intoxicating and such a new frontier to me. I'd actually had the privilege of, so when I went into law, we did a lot of the Y2K stuff that first year that I went into the law firm, and then I did a paper on the tax implications of e-commerce really early for my supervising partner, who was presenting a paper in Hawaii. So I had these really cool moments of connection into this new frontier, and just was so interested in the dynamic and the papering of a new way of doing business.
Was it entrepreneurialism in tech as well, or was it just getting into tech?
It was the entrepreneurial. I was, had a million potential startup ideas, was fascinated by how startups were being formed, knew nothing. It's so fascinating. We know so much now because there's just so much written on it and talked about, and there's so many real successes and real failures. But back then, so I moved to the US in 2002, very early day, February 2002. And that was right on the back of the first e-commerce bust, the big one. Yeah. And, just it was the Wild West. It was absolutely the Wild West.
How did you even move to the US?
Just through some cunning and my husband at the time was moving there, and so I could actually get a visa off the back of him. Yeah. And then I wiggled my way into a company who then sponsored me through to stay with them. It was so much hustle. And it's such an it's such an important point too. Like, I'm glad that you noted that. Like, when I moved to New York, and I've talked about this a lot, like, I was so lost. I was so, you think you're bulletproof as a commercial lawyer at Russell McVeigh. Like, that's as top as you can get in that profession, and certainly in Little Wellington.
Yeah, I'm
amazing. I'm like so amazing, and everyone in the world would be lucky to have me. Yeah. And then you move to a country like the US, and I keep joking that I couldn't even get the right way on the subway. Like, I constantly get on the subway and go the wrong way. It was just like, I've made such bad life decisions. Yeah. Who do I think I am? You go, it was a terribly difficult market at the time, post 9/11. So no one really wanted to think about bringing a lawyer from New Zealand into their marketing team or their whatever team. So it was full hustle and a lot of luck. It wasn't pushy hustle. It was just chipping away at, progressing, networking, being extremely humble. And then it ended up being just taking anything. I actually started working for free because I couldn't be paid on the visa that I was on. Yeah. And just you prove your value over time. Quietly, gently, not in a pushy way.
Pleasant persistence beats resistance.
Pleasant persistence. Oh, I like that. Is that yours?
It was one of my first sales managers. He used to just harp it into me every day.
Yeah.
Harp it into me. Like,
something like that.
Yeah. And it just stuck with me. And now I find myself like an old dad saying it to my team. Pleasant persistence beats resistance. And like,
here he goes again.
Troy. Yeah, what are the colloquialisms have you got for us today? Yeah.
It's really, I think there's just this great, it was the concept of relational networking over transactional networking, that was Adam Grant, Give versus Take, is just, if anyone wants to think about this and hasn't read that book, I just think it's such a powerful nuance to, I'm not going into building friendships and relationships because I want something from that person. Yep. I'm building it because I want to see what I can create, to our earlier point, create from this relationship. Be that for them or be that for me or be that for somebody else. And I've just absolutely built my career on that. So
what do you think about today's society where it's like a lot more online now? Do you think we're missing that ability to be able to create these relationships, or do you think that we just have to create them differently now?
I have a really different view, I think, to the mainstream because I've been in the US and forced online with a lot of my connections. Yep. I have so many really good friends that I've built online first, where I meet them and I realise this is the first time I've met you in person, and it just had never dawned on me that was the case. So I don't think I think it's an and, not an or. Yeah. I think both become really important. And again, they become about your intention in that relationship rather than, frankly, actually how you're building the relationship. Yeah. I love online because it gives me so much more flexibility. So I could feel, because I moved back from the US literally 2 years ago, and I could feel very, very disconnected to my friends in New York and LA. I could feel incredibly disconnected to them, but actually I've got so many pathways to them. I have so many channels where I can connect with them. And I just was back in LA and seeing one of my friends, and it was really weird because I didn't feel like it had been that long since I saw her, because I talk to her basically every day.
Yeah, I've got so many friends in the US exactly that. Like, I go every 2 or 3 years. And we're fast friends straight away within a second, because it's like we just communicate so well online. But I agree with you. Like, I meet lots of people in the industry only online, because it's, I work across the whole of New Zealand and the world, right? Yeah. And then when I finally, I'll get on an awards night and I'll go up and hug them straight away and not realise that that's the first time we've actually met in person.
Yes, exactly.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think there's power in that, and I think from an education standpoint, again, if I go back to when I started, the internet was so nascent. There was so little there. Even then I was batshit excited about it. But the amount of information that's available now to us is just, I think it's easy to forget that if you've been on the journey I've been on. And I think it's certainly easy to not recognise that if you're newer in your career and you've just always had that amount of information available to you. But I'm just such a fan of deep diving topics and not just flitting across news items, but just really finding an interesting topic and going crazy on it.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing of people as of topics and information. Like, it's all there. So it's a matter of, like, are you going to stretch yourself, or are you just going to limit yourself to what's available on your bookshelf or in your community?
Yeah, I think you're right when you say it's your intention with how you build relationships, regardless of whether it be online or offline. It's always your intention.
Yeah.
And so, so talk me through, how does someone go from being working for free in New York to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. It's probably the same thing.
Well, yeah. Now that I say it out loud, eating noodles and then eating noodles.
Yeah. Staying in shit hotels.
Yeah.
I still to this day get really excited by a nice hotel because I just remember how many like really crappy hotels I stayed at.
Yeah.
It's interesting that that's still a thing.
I remember the first time that I went up, because I used to work for a lot of companies, paid a lot of money, be exec, never had my own companies. And then my companies, I'd stay in the shittest hotels, backpackers or whatever, in the States. I remember the first time that I stayed in a hotel that had a big bed, like it wasn't a single bed, or it was in a shitty hotel, and I was like, I have made it.
I've made it. There are so many I've made it moments. Yeah. That is definitely one of them when you're paying for a nice hotel with a good bed. Look, I think it's just about, this is fundamental to my life philosophy, but it's about looking for the opportunities that are there versus like what you don't have. So it's an abundance versus a scarcity mindset, and also showing up every day willing to do the hard work, do your best work, come what may. And so resilience ends up being a massive piece of that. I feel like I'm throwing buzzwords out left, right and centre right now. But
resilience is one of my favourite topics to talk about.
Yeah, and I just, so for me, like, it's not about thinking there's some sort of magical unicorn path, and understanding that really how these results happen is through very hard work, and frankly through facing a lot of really shitty moments and figuring out a way through them. That may not be that you figure it out in that day, you may not figure it out in that week, but you will eventually, through continuing, your journey, through continuing to investigate what you do have, you'll figure it out. And that's, for me, that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It's just like every day showing up, tackling the problem, having a big vision, having no idea how you're going to get there, and just chipping away at it. It's so going from being paid nothing as an entrepreneur to being paid something as an entrepreneur, or being paid nothing as a hire to being paid something as a hire. Like, it's all just, what's the problem I'm solving? How can I find the energy to be really creative about that today and not negative about it, or not see what's not there, but see what is there.
What was your first company?
Massive Incorporated.
What was Massive?
We had a channel for advertising in video games, so a digital channel for advertising in video games. So what we did that hadn't been done before is create an API where you could just hard code in the placement opportunities in a game to advertise to, rather than have to actually hard code in the media. So previously, like Tomb Raider had a hard-coded Jeep in it. We couldn't actually do an API to put a Jeep in there. That would have been really amazing. They probably can now. But we would code in like a magazine that you could put a magazine cover on and sell that as a media unit, or Splinter Cell was a really good one where we had posters on the wall that you could change out. So it created this really dynamic network for advertising into video games that hadn't existed before. Yeah,
and how did Massive come about?
Yeah, through a lot of pivots. Yeah, so it started as a peer-to-peer network integration software company.
Wow, that's a big pivot. Yeah,
huge, possibly the hugest pivot ever. I love telling that story. And it took me a solid few months to figure out what peer-to-peer what peer-to-peer network integration software actually was as well. And then as I actually figured...
It's just pirating software, isn't it?
No, it's about making software pieces talk to other software pieces, but pirating would be way cooler. Software pirate. So kind of got in there, figured out how to start communicating that, because that was the obvious problem for the company. I was just like, well, your marketing materials are crap. Like, this is just a whole lot of words that's somewhat meaningless. started rewriting that, and so as you do that, you learn what that actually means, and then as you learn that, you start to look at what the competitive space looks like. And I just remember going for a walk with the person that became the eventual CEO there, and I said, we're on a hiding to nowhere. Like, A, our burn rate's out of control. B, as I look around the office, no one's really doing anything constructive. Like, literally, the CTO is building desks in the office. I'm like, I don't think that's the best use of his time. And C, the competitive space there's no way we compete. There is no way we can build the war chest, and we're not where we need to be. So we, through a series of conversations, realised that the business was on a backward slope, and took to the board a complete change plan, pivot plan, to move that company into video games, because we thought the pivot was going to be we could take our existing software and create a testing tool. Where we could use similar software with some tweaks to create a testing tool. And testing QA is one of the most expensive pieces of gaming.
Yeah. Can we just talk about that in particular? So when you go to the board, so there's a lot of startups at the moment who, like, cash flow is hard now, right? Like, it's hard to bring in money at the moment. So there's a lot of people who are looking at, shit, what do we do? Do we sunset this? Do we pivot? Do we grow? How do you have the confidence to say, like, go to the board and say, this is what we're going to do? Like, is there any lessons that you can share there from your experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is this evolved over a series of conversations over a period of time. And it wasn't, I've got a great idea, I know the answer. It was much more of I can see the problem. What can we start to do to solve it? So that would be the first thing I would say. The other thing is, weirdly, we had this crew using part of our office at the time, because we had a bit of space, who were from the video game industry. So we just randomly learnt about the video game industry and the opportunities there as part of that. So I think the other thing is this whole design serendipity.
So it wouldn't have come if those people hadn't been in your office?
I don't think so.
Wow.
So there's a bit of serendipity, and you can design serendipity, right? So that was, I think that something else would have come because we were in that problem-solving mindset.
Yeah.
So we were looking for inspiration and ideas anyway. We were looking for them everywhere. It just turned out that the awesome idea happened to be from folks that were using some of our space. So I don't think that's a pure chance thing. I think it's, you go out there looking very broadly at how to solve your problem, and you're interested in any idea. You know, you're interested in every industry, you're interested in the problems each industry has, you're interested specifically in where the growth industries are. So at the time, video games was on the up. If you look at video games, they go up, down, up, down, up, down. It's a fascinating industry. And at that moment, console games were having this massive moment, and we knew that this was a major cost issue for them. And so our initial hypothesis was, well, we can reduce their costs. They're going to love us and they'll pay us to do that. Ended up being like, you spoiler alert, we ended up actually contributing revenue for them in the long haul because the testing software didn't work, which is a whole story. So step one, very clear problem identification with some time to let that give that room to breathe and work to solving it. Serendipity, being curious, maybe some design serendipity, just being interested in what's going on and what some possible solves might be. And then I guess the third thing is just we went in for an exploration with the board. We liked our idea a lot, but we were more going in to say to the board, what we're doing isn't working. We think that this is interesting. We think these are going to be the issues that you have as we look at this solution. So one of the issues was that we couldn't just write down all of the prior software. We needed to try and carry that through. So one of the problems we had to solve is, like, how can we use what we've got in a different way? And so we knew going in we had to solve it that way. So we were actually thinking about it from their perspective rather than just us being genius entrepreneurs with a great idea. And I think often, especially when you're younger, you forget that piece. You forget that they're going to have things that they have to solve as well. So going in with a plan that we felt would address their concerns and also one where we were more coming in and saying, can we go on a journey together to solve what we think is a problem? We think this is going to work, but how do you feel about it? So
yeah, interesting. And then now being in a board seat, right? Like, how do you co-create that, or how do you work with companies that are coming to you with problems?
Oh, that's a nice flip. It's the same thing in the inverse, right? So if I'm in a room with the executive team or the management team, I feel like my job is to make their ideas bigger and stronger and more successful, and not to question their thinking. So it's really easy to go into it, given that I'm brilliant and I know all the right answers.
Yeah, of course.
Always.
Yeah.
But it is really easy to sit there going, I'm a governor and I'm the chair of the board and I've been an entrepreneur and
I'm good at this shit, you should listen.
That's a shit idea.
Yeah.
Really easy to go in with that, but it becomes this very you're capping the creativity of the team at that point, and it's not the most enjoyable conversation to have. So I'm a lot more interested in going in and saying, okay, so this is what you want to do. Talk me through how you identified the problem, how you thought about solving the problem, like how are you dealing with these things, because I'm concerned. So you're going in with the exact same things that I did back in the day, but top down rather than bottom up, essentially.
And did you learn that craft? Did you have to learn it the hard way, or did you find that came natural to you?
That is a super good question. I think that it has just been a process of sharpening my sword as I go and being really, really open to learning, and also really dedicated to excellence.
Yeah.
So there's this interesting dynamic that happens where you just evolve skills through that process. I never feel like I'm done. Like I never feel, so the flying Kiwi thing is just, it feels awkward to me, because I'm like, that feels like a full stop at the end of a sentence where I'm only on the first couple of words. Yeah. And so...
Well, you're still flying, right? Like this.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think that you go through that process of sharpening your sword. And also I think mastery is a lot about knowing, like looking to what you don't know and being really conscious the whole time about where your gaps are. So I'm so much more, it's fascinating you ask that question, because I'm so much more oriented to what I don't know and what I haven't learned and where other people are great.
Yeah.
But
well,
equally,
so if you and I set up a startup right now,
cool, let's do it.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm in.
I've got 6 already, so like, what's 7?
I have a small problem with saying yes to everything. Yeah.
And we were looking at a potential board.
Yeah.
What traits would you say to me? These are the traits that we should look from in a board.
Cool. Well, the first thing is I would look at what we don't have. So a really great example is on the Serko board, I was made chair, which was amazing, big vote of confidence in me, but I'm like, I don't actually have deep governance experience.
Yep.
So the first thing I did was look to bring somebody with really, really strong governance, because we're a listed company, bring somebody with really strong governance capability. And I'm constantly looking to what do we not around the table have super strength in, and what do we need to have outstanding strength in given what we're trying to do. So that's so one of them is, what do we have around the table where there's a clear weakness? Say we're not great with finances. Okay, who's the finance person that's coming on the board? We're obviously clearly very creative human beings, so this wouldn't be an issue.
I don't know if we'd have any weaknesses between us.
I'm pretty sure we don't.
Yeah, we don't need a board.
No, we don't need a board. I'm going to come to that actually. What do we need to strengthen us? But then the other one is, what is our vision? What are we trying to do in the universe? And so who's going to help us get there? Be it their capability or just their sheer awareness of the journey and how to navigate the journey. So, a really good one as you shift gears through scaling your business is to constantly think, what are the new challenges to me given the size and scale that I have?
Yeah.
I'm always conscious of that, because I'm a really good transformation person. I'm a really good early day person.
Yeah.
Once we get into just managing a business, that's never going to be my sweet spot. So
so am I. So we're screwed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We could just start it up and flick it.
Yeah, true,
We'll just keep doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so easy, right?
Yeah.
The other point, though, is do you need a board? And I think that in the early days of being a startup, you want to be really careful about that. Sometimes you're going to be better suited. So listed companies absolutely need to have a board.
Yeah.
Really clear case for that. In a baby startup, I would advise you not to have a board unless you've really got a concern or you really want that check and balance, or you're like, we are crazy people and we need someone to hold us in check and hold us to our objectives. Maybe you'd want that from a babysitting standpoint.
Yeah.
But I love advisory boards, and so I think looking at having a few people around you who you maybe give some stock to, or have an arrangement where they can come in and do some strategic thinking with you. You can reach out to them as mentors when you need them. So, it's really easy to think, well, big listed companies have boards, therefore as a startup we need a board too. I think,
I think I completely agree with you. I deal with lots of early stage startups, and the ones that have boards stifle the growth.
Can do. Yeah. Not always.
But some stifling some of the growth, or conflict the
overcautious, overthinking.
And it makes the exec team overthink and not be what they are as agitators trying to go and build something.
And I would say if you're hearing this right now and you feel this of your board, you need to go and change that right now. It's not going to end well. It's the same thing of if you're having interpersonal issues in your management team, deal with them now.
Yeah.
That you're not going to get anywhere if you're having a lid put on what you're doing. If you're having true restraints. That said, it's worth thinking about, because also maybe you're feeling constricted, but actually what's being done to you is the right thing. It's just that you feel that it's being done to you.
How do you make a hard decision though? Talk me through the process there. Where I love the Hard Thing About Hard Things book. Right? Phenomenal.
Religion. Yeah.
But for anyone listening to this, it's probably thinking, oh my God, I need to fire this person, or I need to pivot, or I need to do these things. Is it literally just breaking down the problem and working your way through it, or?
Yeah. So the hard thing about hard things was really Ben Horowitz exploring all of the complete imploding disasters that were going to topple his various business ventures, and how he hustled effectively and made it happen. Highly worth reading. I agree with you. It's just a brilliant book. Resilience, right? So making hard decisions though, so those were obvious, he just had to figure out how on earth to move his way through hard moments. Making hard decisions, so let's add in getting rid of a team member who's been with you since the early days, but they're just clearly not going to stretch up as you're going on your scale journey. Talking to the chair of your board about them moving on because they're not, working for you. Moving a board member on. I could go on. I think that you intuitively, and I say that very carefully, I think you intuitively feel, again, using that word consciously, that there's a problem.
Yeah.
The first thing you got to do is stop and get some counsel on that, because you want to second guess always those moments of intuition that you're like this gut feel thing. That might work in a fire where you have to just go and do something really quickly. But again, another great book, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, obsessed. Just check your math. Go and talk with someone and just talk it through and go, am I right? Am I right the way I'm thinking about this, or is this a knee-jerk emotional reaction? So it's the first thing I would do. So, okay, now you've made a decision and you're responding, not reacting to something that's feeling like it's bothering you. I think you then just have to go through a process of going, well, I've got to do this. I've got to lean in and have this hard conversation with somebody. I've got to do this in a way where I respect their mana as I go through this, because I think the worst thing you can do is lob people off at the knees. And I think go in and have really upfront conversations and just go, look, this is the reality of what we're dealing with, but I want to do this in the most graceful way possible. So I don't think hard decisions are that hard. The hardest piece is making sure you're correctly identifying them and then dealing with them with grace. I think you can make things really antagonistic and World War III-ish without needing to, and that in and of itself can be really problematic for the business.
Yeah, I love what you said there, respecting someone's mind. And I think that the more you have these harder decisions, the easier they get, because you realise that you can be respectful and you can make a hard decision, like make a decision and move forward, and everyone feels supported or validated,
We also tend to judge. I'm a big believer that there's this barometer of borderline nausea that we feel when we're in a good spot. It just feels like a bad spot. So this whole anxiety or anxiousness around what you might label as a hard decision, flip that. It's actually an opportunity.
Yeah.
You're actually seeing something that you need to see and that you need to take care of. So I think we load these things as they are difficult, but we overload them as being difficult, and the mental anxiety, the cognitive load we put on ourselves, the emotional load we put on ourselves in dealing with them is potentially unnecessary.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting you just robot your way through the world, but actually one of my favourite things I've been saying to people recently in a universe of very hard decisions right now is think like a robot, act like a human. So make a calculated decision, but then execute it with grace.
I really like that a lot.
Thank you.
Do you, with hard decisions though, right, do you look back now and think that you can only really notice that you've made some big hard decisions looking back retrospectively, because in the moment, you felt like it was just the right thing to do moving forward, so you had to do it?
Yeah. I think the biggest things I've done have been very conscious about the fact that I'm taking a big leap or I'm making a hard decision or I'm doing a hard thing. The piece that becomes a little more invisible is the calibrations that you do after that big change moment. So I really love to think about change as a calibration process where we overcorrect and then over-respond to the overcorrection multiple times. A university professor back in my uni days talked about when you're drunk and you're trying to get the key in the lock. You kind of shift side one,
Stand on one foot.
Yeah, exactly. Key goes one way, other way, one way, other way. And I think that that's the change process. And so we tend to, when we've got something big to do, which we could call hard or call awesome, when we're making a big shift, I think we tend to overcorrect. And it's then a matter of figuring out how to recalibrate from that. And again, often we'll overcalibrate the other way, we'll overcorrect the wrong way. And then you slowly get to a place that feels like a balanced place to be. That's my experience. There may be some people who just execute the change dismount much better than I do, but I look at a lot of the shifts in the world, and particularly some of the cultural shifts, and it's really easy for us to get put off by various what are seen as demands from people who are wanting to be recognised in the community and be off-put by that. Whereas I just see them as massive corrections to a problem where we have to settle into a place where we find a good place to be. And I'm not saying happy medium at all. I'm just saying we're all trying to correct into a place where we can recognise what clearly needs to be recognised. Yeah. So it's definitely my observation of how change happens as elegantly as possible. It doesn't always feel elegant.
Yeah, I like it. So thinking about your thoughts on the future then, right? If we're thinking about the change of the industry or what's happening next, what are you excited about, that you see in the future in technology?
I tend to be a very excited, optimistic person, so everything would be my immediate answer. I'm really excited about the potential for AI to allow us to treat humans as humans and let the robots do roboty things.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of experiences in life where we're trying to literally train people to do robot-like things, and it's a demeaning experience for them and it's an unpleasant experience for the consumer on the other end. Or there are just jobs that can be done mechanically and can be done through AI or robotics that won't put the physical load on humans or won't put the banal strain on humans. I love the thought that we can advance to that point and then support our humans to do things that add value and and allow a more human interaction between a brand and a consumer.
Yeah.
So
on that, so I watched your YouTube TED Talk the other night, and it was...
which is now very aged.
Yeah, I was fascinated by it because you said a lot of things that I was like, oh, I wonder how she feels about that now with like LLMs and AI and everything changing, right? And it's funny, like whenever you put something online, you're always like, oh, I don't want to watch that again, or I'm really interested to see what happened. But like thinking about that, then it was around disruption and people and like your Uber driver and the likes that you're talking about. Do you feel more optimistic about people finding opportunities now because of technology, or do you still feel the same, like it's like there's a negative connotation to the disruption?
I've always been optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
My point has always been, though, that we need to be part of the change and not let the change happen to us. And it's a huge message that I hope people hear, because whether it's some form of AI or other thing potentially disrupting the job you do, or just something happening in your business that feels like the economy is doing it to you, or inflation is doing it to you, or some annoying employee is doing it to you. When we do that, we create a traumatic experience with change, and we lose ownership and we lose agency in that. And that's what I fundamentally don't believe in. So a huge part of my squiggly stuff that I talk about is a lot of it sucks, and that's actually the process. And let's not get upset about the process. Let's just be in it, because it's going to take us to the place that doesn't suck. Then it might suck again, but actually at that point you've got a bit of resilience and a bit of a smile on your face, and you're like, oh, I've done this before. I get this. I know what's going on. Don't love it, but I get it. And so my point in my TEDx talk was this is very likely to happen, time frame uncertain. It's very likely to happen that we don't need truck drivers necessarily on the level that we do, that we don't need Uber drivers maybe on the level. Who knows? I'm not sitting here with a crystal ball, but what are we doing as individuals and as collectives to change the game rather than just have the game changed on us? So I get really excited about thinking about, there are obviously some concerns around AI, and I'm not diminishing that by any stretch, but there's some really good baseline stuff we can do with LLMs, with AI, with automation, with a bunch of things that are actually going to make everyone's life and job a lot more enjoyable. And we are fundamentally working our people too hard right now. So a lot of this is not actually about displacement. It's about us being able to kind of move up on the scale of the work we get to do.
I agree. Like we call ChatGPT Jeff at our office. Jeff.
Jeff.
Get
Jeff to do it.
Yeah, and so we like 100 times a day now you hear, we'll get Jeff to do it. And
nice.
It's interesting for me because it's like now it's a positive connotation, right? Because everyone's like, oh, I've got more time to do that. I'll just get Jeff to do that. And
and look, there's a lot of things Jeff shouldn't do, and there's a lot of reasons we should be cautious about how much information we get Jeff. I give Jeff, I love the rebrand because everyone gets ChatGPT wrong and, puts other letters into the acronym and it gets messy. So what can Jeff do so that we can actually think more creatively, not sit there answering email, which is my most hated thing in the known universe, was the most permissive thing we were ever given, and all we've done is use it to and create more of it,
people. Like more inboxes everywhere. If you saw my phone, I worked it out, I get on average 1,100 messages a day on all different platforms.
And that's wrong.
Yeah,
I've
just given up. So I just have I just have out of offices on every platform now. Even LinkedIn, if you send me a LinkedIn email,
I can't cope.
It just says my inbox is dumpster fire. If you really need to get hold of me, maybe call me or try me in the streets. And but I try and get back to as many people as I can.
Oh, look, me too. And there are just certain channels that I'm like, I cannot be who I want to be in the world and keep up on LinkedIn. I cannot be who I want to be in the world and do, insert whatever it is here and just email. That's a whole nother talk. Yeah.
Hey, I want to go back to you mentioned squiggling, right?
Yes.
And so you're a self-proclaimed squiggler.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So squiggling is basically my philosophy, my learnt philosophy, that extraordinary things don't happen when you follow a linear path. progressive measured steps forward don't lead to these outsized results. And really the way you do extraordinary things is by understanding that you will move forward some days, which is awesome and thumbs up, but most days you'll go sideways and backwards. And instead of seeing those as negative or hopeless or exhausting, we want to look for the opportunities that are there. We want to look for the learning there so that we can calibrate, move through our journey and get to that place of positive. So over the long term, it will track on a linear awesome line. You'll be able to plot that for sure. But when you look at it day to day, it's a big ass mess. And the reason it's really important to me to talk about this is that in the day to day, we can feel just so overwhelmed and exhausted and anxious and depleted as humans if we don't understand that that's the process. If we're expecting it to be easy or one step in front of the other step and progressive, we're just going to be disappointed on a constant basis. And I'd rather people see that as an adventure and an adventure of curiosity at that.
Yeah, I always love those analogies when you see people like, this is how a business works, this is how a startup works, like in complete crazy line everywhere. And I think when you break something down, like I often talk to some people in my team and I'll say, sure, that's happening to you right now, but let's think about the whole year, right? Is it a big thing or is it a small thing that's just happening today or in this month or in this moment? If we look at things over a 12-month period, we'll get over it pretty fast.
Yeah, and also so a big piece of this, and I talked about discomfort earlier, a big piece of this is actually learning that those feelings of discomfort and those moments that just feel like your world's been turned upside down, the lostness I felt in New York, the biggest, most powerful things have happened to me in my career from those moments. So I just want to celebrate those moments. So it's not even about saying, although it's important to say over the long haul you'll get there and this is just a moment, blah, 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 but also there's power in that.
Living in the moment. Yeah.
There's power in being lost, actually. It's an opportunity to redefine yourself and what you're doing. And the greatest things have happened to me where I've let that be what it is and figure out how I can course correct and how I can be great and how I can be fabulous in those moments.
Oh, awesome. Have you always been like this, like in terms of your optimism and your thinking critically about, feeling lost?
Yeah. Gosh, I'll need to go away and do some therapy on that for sure. That's such a good question. I'm not sure that I was.
Because it's like I often talk with people, and this is why I'm curious to ask you about this, in that I'm extremely optimistic, and I am one of these crazy people, like we were talking about it at dinner last night. Give me a really, really hard problem, and I'm excited because I feel like, oh, this is fun and new to me and foreign, and I'm out of my comfort zone, and I feel like it's, I'm enjoying this because I get bored of the repetitive sort of mundane things. But it's hard to teach that. Yeah,
I think I've learned to be joyful about it, but I think I've been very resilient for a very long time.
Yeah.
So if I look back, because your question's a great question, and if I look back through school and through university, I think that I was hyper resilient. So no matter what came my way, I always thought, I can get over this. I can deal with this. This is okay. This isn't insurmountable. I think what I've learnt through truly breaking out of the box and going to New York and having a variety, and that's just the first of many lost experiences that have created amazing outcomes for me, as I've done that multiple times, I think I've found the joy in it for myself. And I also am really excited to help other people find the joy in it for themselves. So I think that's been a learnt experience versus I don't know that you could teach it.
Yeah. Interesting. Hey, you've referenced a bunch of books and things on the podcast. Thank you. Like, for me, the podcast is all about information sharing, right? I just want people to be able to give, like, if you're lucky enough to ride the elevator up, send it back down, filled with rich information so that's easier for the next person to take it up.
Yeah, I love it.
And so we always try and finish the show with, if I'm going to put one thing in particular down in the show notes, that's something that's moved you, whether it be a TED Talk or a book or a conference that you went to or a person or something that just like you're like, this is the one that people should go off and have a look at. Is there something that comes to mind?
The biggest one for me, I want to say so many books right now. It's just hurting me to pick one, and usually I'll
Most people usually say two.
I will usually do that, but I am going to actually say the single most powerful book I've read like in the last 10 years is Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah.
Because I think we tell ourselves a lot of stories about our thought process and our decision making. I think the gut feel thing, I'm a massively, massively, massively instinctive person, but the gut feel thing I think is very misunderstood. And so I think understanding system 1 and system 2 thinking, understanding the trappings of the various heuristics that blind you and limit you in terms of, the realm that you're in and thinking that's the only way. There's just so much power in that book. And I mean, rightly, he was the first psychologist to win a prize in economics. Like it's pretty special. It's pretty special. So there's a lot that I would love to share. I mean, my one podcast shout out I'd give is the Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish. He just has spectacular guests who really push my thinking. And I like his mental models approach as well. So I will add that one in. But yeah, the Thinking Fast and Slow. It's not an easy book to read, but it's well worth it.
Awesome. That's not the first time it's come up on the podcast too.
Interesting.
Hey, I know you've got a busy day and then off to the High Tech Awards, so I'll let you get on and enjoy your day, and hopefully I'll catch up with you later for a drink.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, hey, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Cheers. It's not lost on me that I get to sit here and do this for a job and chat with amazing, passionate, just super bright people and just get to upskill my knowledge and just be a guy in a room listening to awesome people speak and share their wisdom and their stories with me. And so I'm just thankful for people like Claudia and everyone else that comes on the podcast. And I'm to anyone else that wants to come on in the future, come on and share some knowledge and just be open and vulnerable and tell us your stories, because everyone's loving this podcast. We're getting such growth. So many people are sending us great feedback. So now's your time to get on the bus, get on the wagon and jump down and subscribe, share this, follow, jump and give us a rating if you like. But thank you to everyone that's come on the podcast. Thank you to everyone that's listening. And until next time, I'm Troy, and you've been watching or listening to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast.
This podcast is produced by John Otaka from Empire Films.